to the conscience of a peace-loving world? Do we consider the mounting dead bodies with every passing conflict as only pieces of statistics? What happened to freedom and justice? Martin Luther King Jr. of the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." In this recent assault, good friends of the press, not only homes and military barracks were targeted, but schools, media houses, health facilities, and other civilian facilities were fatally pummeled. How many more babies have to die before the world rises to the occasion? How many more innocent souls have to be lost before the world springs into action? Jerusalem, no doubt, is a holy city, and it is at the center of the immediate spark to this recent round of conflict in the holy month of Ramadan. But long before that sad incident, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, had been living in dire conditions in Gaza. International observers have termed it the largest open-air prison in the world. Every few years, a disproportionate war plays out right before our own eyes. How can a people with no standing army be left to the vagaries of a nuclear-armed country that has the unconditional support of at least 3 veto-wielding nations of the UN Security Council, with no shortage in armaments and billions of dollars in military aid every year? The Palestinian issue indeed goes beyond a Muslim-Jewish tussle. It is a humanitarian issue. The state of Palestine has a relatively considerable Christian population that was also not spared the scourge of constant bombardment. It will shock the Ghanaian public that the loud cries of Muslim children were mixed with the cries of Christian Palestinian children, mercilessly mangled under rubble caused by constant bombardments. People of conscience around the world should call for a permanent end to the suffering of the weak, frail, and deprived. The Republic of Ghana should add her voice to the growing calls on the world to go beyond ceasefire and cessation of hostilities agreements to ensure permanent freedom and justice to the oppressed. As the guns and warplanes have gone temporarily silent, the world has to hold nations accountable for what they do. And the UN should impress on nations to respect the terms of treaties and accords that are overseen by the international community. The Oslo Accords were meant to set in motion a series of processes that would culminate in a two-state solution. Sadly, not so much has been achieved because of non-commitment and indifference on the part of nations in the region. I humbly use this opportunity to remind the world of the cardinal points of what was agreed in the Oslo Accords. The declaration called for, among others, Israel to withdraw from Jericho and Gaza and eventually from the West Bank, the establishment of a Palestinian state, and the question of Jerusalem was also treated in the Oslo Accords. Sadly, more and more Palestinian lands are being annexed by the use of brute force to establish well-fortified Jewish settlements. Ghana, just like all nations of the world, has defined demarcations and can't encroach on the lands of neighboring countries. But sadly, that cannot be said in the case of the circumstances the Palestinian people find themselves. Palestinian territories are continuously annexed and whole communities are hemmed in, and access to basic health care and education takes hours because of multiple checkpoints and other hurdles that are put on the path of Palestinians. If apartheid South Africa enforced segregation, then the situation the Palestinian people are living in is even a notch higher. In closing, East Jerusalem, with all its sanctuaries, should be the capital of the Palestinian state. Moves by some nations to relocate their embassies from Tel Aviv to the holy city complicate matters and give an undue sense of entitlement to one side of the field. I humbly call for a permanent end to all hostilities on both sides and an honest return to peace talks and the implementation of all UN resolutions to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has sadly entered its 73rd year. The problem is as old as the United Nations itself, and the world should attach the same urgency to solve this one, just as we have gone past many others, like the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Yugoslav War, and recently the war in Ukraine. It will take courage, sincerity, and a shared common humanity to achieve this. Thank you so much, friends of the press, for making time. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.